Well, good morning, everyone. Here we are over on the Collective. Thanks for joining us. And we're a little tardy this morning, a little late, because we're trying to sort out some audio-visual complications at the host site end of things. But here we are, getting after it. Today's topic, what we're going to do is adjust the topic to some degree. We had a guest panel with Doc G, Doc C, who's here with me right now, and the Slavinator, Seb Lavoie, was going to be joining us, and we're going to be talking about the effects of power. But given that two of the guests have dropped from the panel due to technical issues, and that we want the panel that we had in mind to discuss the effects of power, what we're going to do this morning is Doc C and I are going to talk about maybe the positive and negative aspects of people who feel they have power or are in power or are seeking power. And the reason that I wanted to talk about that, I threw up a little Instagram post just before we went into this live chat here on the Collective. And the reason I put up the post is because I think that most people consider power as held by an institution, maybe as represented by one man or one woman, but as part of a large institution called a government or a corporation or a large entity that is a large group of people, and someone is representing the institutional power. But I feel that the most power in the world is held within the individual. And so I wanted to make sure that on today's subject, power, the effects of power, that we didn't overlook the responsibility of the individual. That every morning when we wake up, we get to choose whether we're going to be on the dark side or the light side. Are we going to do good or are we going to do bad? And so I threw up some points on Instagram and illustrated it with a artificial intelligence derived image of two wizards. One is a good wizard and one is an evil wizard. And every day I do believe that we get to choose how we expand our power out into the world all around us for good or for evil. So what I'm going to do really quickly is punch out the topic headlines that I threw in my Instagram post this morning, and maybe we can dive into it a little bit or see what Doxy has to say. So here we go. I'm just going to read it real quick. Understanding the effects of power requires the consideration of both its positive and negative aspects. I'm going to list off the positive aspects, then I'm going to list off the negative aspects. Positive effects of power: leadership and progress, influence and inspiration, protection and security, and empowerment of others. The negative effects of power can be the abuse of authority, corruption and nepotism, lack of accountability, and conflict and competition. I concluded my Instagram post this morning with, it is essential to recognize that power itself is not inherently good or bad. Its effect depends on how it is wielded and for what purpose. Ethical considerations, accountability mechanisms, and a strong sense of responsibility are necessary to mitigate the negative effects of power and ensure that it is used for the betterment of society as a whole. So there's a lot in my Instagram post to tease out. But before we get into the minutia or the granularity of the topic, do you have any initial thoughts, Doc?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because the way I look at power, and by the way, folks, let me know if I sound okay to you. The way I look at power, it's related to control. Power is directly influencing an individual, or a group, while control is manipulating, regulating a group, situations, institutions. It reminded me of what Alfred Adler said once, and he had a theory of inferiority complex, which means we had certain limitations that were derived from childhood for whatever reason, and we fight to try to make better those inferiorities. And it isn't how society views it. Inferiority is something we might think. Maybe we don't think we have enough control in our lives, whatever. And this can sometimes dictate power, and as you mentioned, in a bad way or a good way. It really depends on the individual. But I think this is a motivating. Yeah, see, this is what I'm concerned about. I'm getting a reverb type Dr. Carl's voice.
That sounds fine. I mean, we've had way worse over here. It's
Okay.
not too bad at all.
So that's that. I have a huge thing with control because society is so important for right to have control, and I think power is a means to an end of getting control.
I agree. Now, so one of the things that I see happening out there to some degree is individuals feeling like they are powerless, when I feel it's quite the opposite. We are all powerful, but it's a matter of how we step into that power, how we step into that control, step into that affecting those around us, whether it's manipulating or whether it's cajoling or whether it's shaping or guiding or leading or recalibrating or abusing. There's many ways that power can be used or control can be used to create a negative or positive outcome. And so, what are your thoughts on maybe individual impact versus institutional impact? Obviously, there's a big difference between the two on the impact of numbers or volume, for lack of a better term. But do you feel that individuals today in a modern society feel powerless as compared to institutional power? Is there something that is making people feel like they are powerless?
It's like a hornet's nest.
I know. That's what I like to do, buddy.
I think the media has a lot to play in this because they can make you feel however they want. So they can make you feel powerless like they did with what happened 3 years ago. And they can make you feel powerless in a lot of different ways. We saw a lot of diseases pop up all of a sudden. And they're blowing. What do they call it? They call it making mountains out of molehills. That's a loss of control and a loss of power. When you see a lot of crime, that makes you feel like you have a loss of control again, loss of power. So I think they have an influence. Society in general. We live in such a different world, don't we, Sean? 40 years ago, we had no clue what the heck was going on in the government or anywhere. And now we see everything going. And we see people taking advantage of things, and we never saw before. And maybe it's always been the same. We just never saw it. But I think that takes power out of people's hands. They wonder, can I do this? But on the other side of the coin, I'll leave you with these two options. I have to wait for myself to shut up. The other option is people now have power that they didn't have before with things like cancel culture. So it's really interesting to see that dynamic.
Well, there's something interesting that I'm curious about your opinion on. I was speaking with someone yesterday, and I was relaying the story of how I'd seen a video recently in San Francisco, and it was an individual just walked in and had their shirt pulled up just over their nose so that they were kind of disguising themselves. And they just blatantly walked into a store, walked over, grabbed a bag off a shelf, and just start scooping things into the bag. Once that bag was full, they put it down, grabbed another bag, and just started scooping things off the shelf and filling that up. As the staff watched this occur, the individual just grabbed the bags, and everyone was on their cell phones filming it. The individual just grabbed the bags and just walked straight out of the store without paying. And it was the reason that the employees are standing there filming it is because they're seeing this more and more often. Just people that have no respect for the rule of law, understanding that in certain parts of San Francisco, there is a no response rule, or if shoplifters walk in and shoplift, no one stops them. The police don't attend. The employees don't get involved because the institutions have said we don't need that hassle. And now you've got some lawlessness occurring in parts of a major city where things have slipped backwards so much that individuals and institutions are becoming powerless against, we'll call it a wave of crime. Now, I don't want to take the podcast in a direction of we need more Dark Knights or we need more Batmans or we need more crime fighters or whatever the case is, Cape Crusaders. But I see the rapid decline of the rule of law, the rule of common courtesy, the rule of proper application of power in various moments. When you mentioned 40 years ago, that's what made me think of today and how much it has changed over 4 decades. That would never have happened 4 decades ago. Whether the employee stepped in or whether I stepped in and say, hey, bro, what are you doing? Are you out of your mind right now? Put that stuff back and make sure that it's lined up properly. That's what would have happened 40 years ago. But now everyone's turning a blind eye to feeling like they're powerless. I'm not saying that you got to club someone over the head or do a citizen's arrest, but I mean, how much more powerless can individuals and institutions become? At the rate that we're going, it's not looking great. What are your thoughts?
When I entered another world, when you talked about superheroes, it's a lot of times psychologically you look at superheroes and they're like Batman. You have the Joker, who's this above normal problem, and then you have Batman, supernatural to try to help. And I don't know where the FBI and the military went. There's some reason they're out of it, and the local police are incompetent. So it's only Batman that can solve this problem. But superheroes are there designed to help us solve those above normal problems. And I see sometimes we look at that as helping us at least vicariously get power. Right? So it's kind of interesting how you look at that. If I go back to your comment about robbing, that gets complicated too. There's a lot of factors there. But I know with that incident that happened, I don't know if you're referring to the reporter that was filming and then all of a sudden they robbed while she was filming.
No, but I have seen that one as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that one just happened. Another one just a couple days ago, and maybe these people are rationalizing it. I'm powerless. I need this. Maybe they're stealing it to sell it. I'm sure it's a little bit of everything. But you also have the divide between those who have and those who have nots again.
That's true.
Back to that classic argument.
Yeah, and what to do with that? I mean, like in that moment where it's the reporter is recording it, or a standard issue bystander is recording the moment of the lawlessness, the non-response, the powerlessness of the moment. And I feel that every time it's recorded, it just puts another nail in the coffin as to the powerlessness of society to some degree. And you made an interesting comment about Batman and the Joker. Well, I hadn't really considered the Joker in the equation, but what I have seen out there is not a recent phenomenon. It's been going on for, I'd say, about a decade. More correctly, over the last 5 years. The Joker has been elevated to some degree as almost like now he's the guy that I want to emulate. He's the guy who, pushes back against the system in a lawless way and kind of sticks it to the man, for lack of a better term, and has taken it to a degree where lawlessness and criminality and that sort of evil mind is now almost becoming a not something to look up to, but something that, I can do that too. That gives me power, rather than fighting the good fight and being powerful at the right times. I see it as individuals who are wanting to skulk around in the dark and do evil to gain their power. Again, that good magician or good wizard versus that bad wizard, as it were. Have you seen it? Have you noticed that yourself, that there's been this elevation or this putting it up on a pedestal to some degree of the Joker, as it were?
Oh, I absolutely have. I think Chance says it's the idea of the outlaw taking power for themselves. And yeah, I've seen that changed. Christians will probably remember the verse in Isaiah where he says at the end times, the good will look bad, bad will look like it's good. And I'm paraphrasing it. Mm-hmm. But it is similar because now you have these, as you mentioned, these evil doers being looked up to. And that's a bizarre thing because you encourage that behavior. The media showing things, crimes being shown, looting, because they know it gets the clicks. But that also motivates people who feel like you don't have power. This will motivate them. They all have power. And I think that's interesting because you have a lot of these individuals that will seek power because they feel powerless. And actually, social media is interesting.
I agree.
Because we had power, and then the owners of the social media pull back some of it, and it's complex because there are a lot of people who are spreading misinformation. Mm-hmm. So I get that, but it's interesting because you had a lot of power at the beginning, and now hey Sean, you say something you shouldn't, you're knocked off. Because it used to crack me up when people say, nobody's going to shut me up on this. And then they got the account deleted. It's like, yeah, I don't know how you didn't see that coming.
Yeah, indeed. And that raises an interesting point because when I put my post up this morning in respect to the balance or doing good in the world or doing evil in the world, the effective power, the power that we all have as individuals, I was thinking more along the lines of social media rather than starting, an evil clown circus, a new institution. I was thinking of simply social media as the path that I wanted to talk about this morning. And so I feel that social media does give you a certain power if you wield it correctly, but it gives you a certain amount of responsibility. And I think that's the missing ingredient is if you have felt powerless in the past and through social media you get a small following that makes you feel like you've got some power. Well, if you've never had responsibility before, well, now there's a problem. The more that you become powerful, for lack of a better term, the more evil you can do if you're not using good, responsible practices. And so if you've never learned responsibility, then how on earth can you be responsible with your power? And so I look at a lot of, 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds, influencers out there waving their magic and weaving their stories. And they don't understand the responsibility of what they're doing because maybe they've never held down a job. Maybe they've never worked a part-time job. Maybe they've never worked a day in their life to understand how to play well with others, how to work within institutions, how to be a powerful individual within a powerful space. They just have never learned how to play the game well, and therefore they're setting new rules to a new game that they're shaping called I'm going to be powerful without any responsibility. That's kind of what I'm starting to see out there to some degree. What do you think?
I think you're spot on. I think if you remember again going back 40 years or more, when we were teenagers, we didn't have power in the sense of we can barely buy anything. You couldn't drive anywhere. Maybe at 16, 17, if your parents had the money to get you a car. But you really couldn't do much. And that's changed. As you mentioned, 18 to 21, they can cancel singers, actors, That holds a lot of power.
It does.
Sometimes I'm wondering, are they doing it for the right reason, or just because they can? Can we knock out Bud Light? It's amazing because it is intoxicating to some. If you've never had it, and you and I know, Sean, 40, 50 years ago when you were teenagers, nobody heard us.
No.
When we were at family functions, you go over there with the rest of the teenagers. Let the adults talk.
Yeah, we wouldn't.
And I'm not.
We would not have been missed.
No, and I'm not saying that was right, but there's got to be a balance from where now all of a sudden they have so much power, and I see this a lot. The younger generation, some of them, I don't want to overgeneralize, but some of them are fighting back against because now they can see. Oh, we can dictate politicians, the adults in the room. We can make more money. So you have a lot. That's a big topic you brought up.
It is. Well, we do have a bit of time, and since it's just you and I, we can talk about it. I think that one of the observations that I made, we'll get to comments in a sec, is the younger generation, we'll call it the 18 to 22-year-old, and I'm not throwing them under the bus. This is just an observation. This is just a social phenomenon observed over a period of time. So I'm not going to refer to any specific individual. I'm just talking about an age group where they have been raised in social media. They understand the rule set. They are interested in being powerful in video games, being powerful in their group through memes, the most memes, the best memes, the fastest memes, the most exciting memes, whatever the case is. Their sense of competition or rule set within the new social media space for the new generation is rapid, and it comes without responsibility to some degree, because the consequences have never been faced up. In a video game, if you slay the dragon or the dragon slays you, there's no consequences there other than you go to the next level or you redo the next level, but you just keep doing you, and there's no consequences as to whether you do it well or not. And that's a case with social media. And we've all heard that glib statement before of keyboard warriors in their basement. If I showed up in your basement, things would be different. You wouldn't be typing those things. And it's true. It's true, because the things that are said on social media, the representations that are made, are to some degree done with no sense of consequence. And if someone typed out something mean about Doc C and then showed up at his front doorstep, chances are they get a tongue lashing, they get a finger wagging, they get a, hey man, do it better next time. Here's what you shouldn't have said. Now you get to apologize, and the lesson is going to be this as you move forward. Those are consequences or learning moments, but it feels to me nowadays that the speed of social media and the lack of consequence doesn't teach someone an appropriate amount of responsibility. And so it can be full steam ahead forward trajectory on just being a jerk and just keep increasing the amount of jerkiness to till your maximum jerk, and no one's holding you accountable. And therefore, your power base can be provided by people who just like to hear you yelling jerky things without any consequences, without any ramifications. I feel that things are moving so quickly nowadays without consequence that we're heading in the wrong direction to some degree.
I couldn't agree more with you. You still hear me well?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. I did as I turned down my volume completely. I can hear my own talk now. I don't know if it'll help anybody else out there.
That sounds good now.
But at least it'll help me concentrate better. You're absolutely right, though. You're absolutely right, though. It reminds me also of LARPing. Right, these individuals going out there and doing these things and acting like this is a game, and they're distracting the police, detaining them from doing other things they're doing, especially in areas where there's high crime. They're exhausting the resources for their stupid little games. And this is a problem. But I think the biggest point you made, I think, I know we're kind of veering away from power to a certain degree, but not much, is the speed of social media. We've never seen this before. I mean, the velocity of things that are happening. I always tell people who are young, and this is anybody under 45, 50. This isn't just 20-year-olds. This generation is the most culpable generation in history, in my opinion. Because you can find out anything you want now. Maybe 50 years ago, I don't know what this is. You know, if you wanted to look up Cuba, I knew the elevation and the flower. And that's all I really knew. That's what the Britannica told me. But now, what's your excuse for your misbehavior? I didn't know. How do you not know? You have access to almost anything you ever wanted. It's beyond comprehension with AI. That's unbelievable. You can ask it anything.
For sure.
What'd you say?
I said, yeah, for sure. It is mind-boggling that we have supercomputers in our hands on a regular basis, and they're being used to play Candy Crush or whatever.
Yeah, that's another issue. But it's remarkable because what are they going to say in 20, 30 years when they look back? The next generation is going to say the same thing that every generation says. What the hell did you do? And they're going to look back and say, why were you doing that? What are they possibly going to give us a reason? You can't say I don't know.
Well, you know what I do see as an interesting phenomenon is when you look at like 2-3 decades ago, nobody in that generation looked back on the generation previous and thought they were lazy, or they didn't get to work, or they didn't try hard, or they weren't productive, or they weren't ... Generations previous produced, but the modern generation today has become comfortable with not producing anything tangible to some degree. And so I'm not saying that the modern young generation is lazy. I'm just saying that it's a different generation that's producing different outcomes. And those outcomes are not as work-based or substance-based or productiveness-based as it was even just 2 decades ago. I feel that there's a phenomenon growing where it's okay not to be productive. It's okay to complain. So production is being replaced by complaining to some degree. And I'm not saying everyone, and I'm not saying they're a complete one-for-one switch. What I am saying is production has been reduced, complaining has increased, and the responsibility to adjust that ratio feels like it doesn't exist anymore. My generation, if you were underperforming, you were held accountable. But today's generation, and I've talked to my sons about this, and I've talked to some of their friends about this, what is the greatest struggle for your generation right now was my question. And the main answer is lack of accountability. Just not being held accountable to homework, not being held accountable to grades, not being held accountable to showing up to work on time, not being held accountable to ... fill in the blank. Lack of accountability. And I see it on a regular basis, the lack of accountability from generation to generation. And so what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a great point. I think it's a lot of that is responsibility. I want to tie it back to power in case people are saying, what about power? But it is. The lack gives you the desire for power when you don't have things, or you see the social media ability to do what you want to do. You mentioned earlier, Salty Jinx highlights it too. Great power comes great responsibility. There is a lack of responsibility. Thanks, Chance. That's pretty good. So you have this issue. With that, back to your comment, I think you were referring to what are they going to do? There's a different generation. They have different motivations. I think they're lost to some degree. I also feel bad for them. And this isn't a pejorative comment. I think it's definitely tougher for them because there's not as much certainty as we used to have. There used to be much more certainty. You did things, and you knew your direction in life a little easier and purpose. I think they've been misled with social media, believing they can be big stars. It's kind of ironic. We're on here on the YouTube channel, but a lot of them, I think, they're going to be the next Joe Rogan, and the next whoever else the next one is. I can't remember the names of it, but you know the point. And it isn't going to be like that. Now social media has become like Hollywood was 20, 30 years ago. You remember that. I know you do. When everybody worked in LA, they wanted to be a movie star. There were bartenders, there were servers. Hopefully the producer saw them, or the director. And they did. Sometimes Brad Pitt was picked that way. But it was like one in every 100,000. It was so small.
That's right.
And I think today the young people are fooled to a certain degree because they think everybody's going to be able to do that. And you can't. You just can't. You have more possibly. And they're making some money off of it. And I get it. But it's just really. I think they live in a very interesting time. And I feel bad for them because it's a very unusual time. You have a lot of chaos all over the place. Social media is just the Wild West. I remember talking to a couple guys from a three-letter agency, and they tell me we've lost control. If they don't regulate it, we can't control it. There's so much going on here that the media doesn't even tell you what the web, with the hackings. I don't know if you ever use Google Alerts. I use Google Alerts a lot.
I used to.
When I type in, you do? When I type in cybercrime, it's almost every other day there's a huge hack. And yet mum's the word when it comes to national media. They don't say anything about it. But it's not pretty rogue.
Yeah,
and I just wonder.
You know, so to your point, tie two things together here. Speaking of Hollywood and Brad Pitt and how he was discovered, etc. Well, that story is a feel-good story. It's a positive story. It's a story that everyone clings to or hooks into and thinks, well, if he could, I could. But no one gets to read the thousands of stories about the person who that attempt to become a Hollywood star broke them. They eventually became destitute because they couldn't pay their rent because they weren't making enough tips as they were slinging coffee. And so their dreams were abandoned and they went down a dark path because of their disillusionment. Those stories aren't told. No one would engage in Hollywood, wanting to become a Hollywood actor if they heard the tens of thousands of stories that are to some degree destitute. And so it's the glorification of someone who has, we'll call it, won the lottery or has gone large and in charge, cracked it out of the park with a lucky break. Now all of a sudden that's attainable for everyone because that's the only story that's being told is the good time story rather than the slinging coffee and not getting tips story. And I feel that that's kind of what's going on with today's generation to some degree, the younger modern generation who've latched onto the Brad Pitt story, which is now they're going to be an influencer, now they're going to be a podcaster, now they're going to be mega awesome on the internet. And whether they ever get any traction on that or not is immaterial to me because what they haven't learned is how to work and be responsible and accountable. If you get out of high school and start a podcasting channel or you start a social media channel with the idea that you're going to become famous and rich and powerful, well, where did you learn the lessons beforehand to be able to wield that power appropriately, whatever power means to that individual? And I feel that with power comes great responsibility, as the old saying goes, but that responsibility can only be learned once you've been held to some degree with accountability. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree completely. And hold on, shut myself up. I completely agree with that. People, we all see it the last 10 years. People want to attain things without doing much for it. What's the easiest way around it? And look, it is a lot easier in some ways to do certain things. And social media, I think social media has has peaked in the sense of creating superstars. Now it's become like Hollywood. It requires a lot more effort. And you can still do it. You and I had this conversation a chance. It requires effort. It requires to run it like a business if you want it to grow. I look at Sean Ryan. Whether you like him or not, he put a lot of work into that dang thing. You can tell by the way he did it. And he's number two now. So he really pushed it. Isn't that crazy?
This morning. Yeah, I mean, maybe you saw it on Instagram as well. I just saw one of his posts this morning where he demonstrated an image of him being number two, and like, for whatever you think of the guy, and that's not today's topic, but he wields a lot of power now, and that power, I think, came about quite quickly. His, we'll call it, rise to ascension came about quite quickly. But what a lot of people don't understand is how freaking hard that dude had to work to get to where he's at. I mean, I remember watching him when he started off, and it was a gong show. I mean, it was pretty terrible. And through a lot of hard work, a lot of probably good guidance, help from friends and etc., shaping his package to some degree, I think he's come a real long way. He's really changed his image to some degree, and so I think that's an important aspect of power. As he's evolved up through that, we'll call it levels of power, I think I've seen him shape his way differently. He's started to understand maybe his responsibility. I think that he's kind of holding himself to some degree more accountable in his platform and some of the things that he says, and how he's putting information out there. Do you feel that he's changed his approach since he started?
No, I agree with you. And I know some people aren't going to like this comment and get it. But I like the guy. I mean, I communicate with him every so often on Instagram. He actually communicates back. He doesn't have to the size that he's at. We've talked several times about different things. But it's. I think he's changed. I think he's changed. He realizes he's a personality, and then he also realizes he's a dad. So I can definitely see the love for his children. He loves that family life. And I think if I was to talk to him, I would put money on the table. He's like us, in the sense of it's a struggle internally to be doing this and wanting to do something different. And I think he has that in him. I've heard him say a couple times where he didn't want to do this. This is not his cup of speed. I can tell by his personality that it's not the most awesome thing to do for him. I think if he had the opportunity to sit there and talk to these great people, he would love to do that, and he would hear less about anything else. But he doesn't always work that way unless you have money. But so I do think he's got that going. But he's definitely changed. Like you said, he put a lot of work into it. Show's changed a lot. I mean, it's a really class show now, at least production wise, right?
I agree. And I think that's the thing I appreciate most, and that's a really critical element on the discussion effects of power to some degree, which, again, we'll have to dig into when we've got a full panel, as we tried to do this morning. But I've seen him adjust his position on some subjects. I've seen him adapt through the process, and that's pretty critical for me when I'm observing someone from the sidelines. Their phenomenon, their individual journey is how they deal with power, and he has adjusted his way. And you know what? Initially, I think, like, maybe everyone. I don't know. I'll generalize. I think that initially, when someone feels a certain sense of new power, it's a bit giddy. It's a bit like maybe a honeymoon phase, or it's an unusual, maybe not euphoric or joyous, but it's a giddy moment where you can't believe it's happening. You're trying to figure out why it's happening, and you're trying to shape the minor level of power that you may have just been attributed to you. And so trying to figure that out, how to use it properly for good, I think takes time. And by time, I mean repetition, not just you get a boatload of new power and then you sit around on it for a couple of weeks and all of a sudden you're way better at it. I mean, it takes time to wield it wrong or incorrectly, and to wield it right or correctly. And I've kind of seen him to some degree from the sidelines. Again, I'm not a regular viewer of him, but historically, I've seen him adjust his wielding of his power to a degree now where I think he's doing a much better job.
Yeah, to his defense, I'm not saying that you're criticizing. To his defense too, for people out there when he changes positions, I think you might agree with this, Sean. When you do things like we're doing, and you're interacting with individuals, especially when you start interacting with expert fields, you learn so much that you never would have learned elsewhere. I've changed my mind on several things because I never knew that. Yeah, most people don't know about because they're not into doing this research. They're not in the mix of it. Like special forces stuff. I'm sure you know stuff. You probably only share about 10% of what you know. And other people speculate, but then when you start telling them, they're like, oh, never would have thought that before. Like the conversation we had yesterday with Dick Thompson, there was things he was pointing out, and I'm thinking, I would have never had a clue. I've interviewed over 120 of you guys, and I still didn't have a clue about it. So then I have to adapt and change.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so shows like this can, like Sean, they can change you. It's the person as you start realizing talking to the experts. So, wow, I never knew that. I never saw how complicated it was, or how I heard of this component of it before. And it's a privilege, honestly, it's an honor for us, at least for me, to do these things because I learned so much from you guys as well, and from everybody that I've interviewed. And that's what keeps me going with it, because I get to see a more realistic view of the world. And you can say it gives me more control. Not in the sense of power, because there are different. And I know some of the individuals have asked those questions, but it gives me more of a control of at least what reality really is. Back to that conversation I was telling you about with the French philosopher. And folks, make a note if you've ever read the book Simulacra and Simulation, where he says that we're living in a false reality. We're living in a reality that's created by the movies, by the media, by the news. Whatever they show us is what we think is real. And it doesn't mean the crime isn't real. But the level of crime may not be real. We may think it's a lot higher just because it's what we see. If you ask people how many murders in LA, a lot of times you get 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, and it's only 300, 400. Not only, but it's really low compared to estimations that I get. And I give three options. I'll say is it 3,000 a year, 1,000 a year, 350 a year. They always pick 1,000 to 3,000. You can see it's already altering the reality that we live in.
Yeah, I like that. The interesting thing about Sean Ryan that I appreciate, and more to your point specifically on podcasts with people who I respect because I know they've been in the game, they've learned the hard lessons, they've got the experience, is I will be changing my opinion in real time when I'm in a podcast. So to your point yesterday, when I was in the podcast with yourself and with Dick Thompson being a MACV-SOG member and an author and a PhD in psychology and many things. When I was listening to him and doing back and forth with him, I was in real time adjusting my stance on some things. And by adjusting, I mean like micro nuance, minutia adjustments, not like big radical worldview changes, but recalibrating in real time my thought processes on how the world operates or how history operated or how the future may operate. I think the conversations with people who understand power, like Dick does or did or will in the future, these kind of conversations with people who have wielded power, that are open-minded and intellectual and can flow in a conversation so they're not dogmatic. These are the kind of conversations that really help me understand what the effects of power can have within a real-time conversation and for the future.
Yeah, and you jumped into the game, Sean. Because now with great power comes responsibility.
That's right.
As your audience grows.
Well, that's an interesting question for you, since we're speaking about the effects of power and the power of podcasting, the power of the voice, the power of the message, the power of the trajectory that someone may have as a life example. What are the things that you observe from the collective as an example that resonate with you, or you think resonate with viewers to some degree?
I think it's the conversations that you folks have. And a lot of people wonder and wanted to hear about other people talking about it. The collective in that case is unique in the sense that you have individuals that have very experienced lives, storied lives, and they get to share their viewpoints about certain topics. And eventually you will change in the audience's perception. It has to happen. If they start listening to you more and more, and if they agree with you more and more, they respect you more and more, then they start listening to you more in a different capacity. And just some guy on the street that they listen to. Now it's like, I like the way he thinks for whatever reason. It either resonates with me, and I want to keep hearing it. And that's what I tend to find a lot with the collective is you have folks, men and women who share their takes on things, and it's also very civil. And I think it reminds me a little bit of that old. Well, it used to be like the old talk show. They actually were substantive. Like Donahue, whether you like him or not. He had some tough guests. Who's that other guy? Frank Buckley. I think it was him that did that Line of Fire show.
Oh, right.
I mean, you remember that? Really tough guests. Those were really good conversations people had. And now it's more theater than anything else. I think here you're getting back into that mode of we're just having serious civil conversations about things. I think that's important. I don't know about the power aspect. That's going to be the unique aspect of it. It's going to see how people view you over the next portion of the years. That's going to be interesting.
Well, you know what my hope is that the collective as a whole, the collective, not Sean or Chance or Doc C, but the collective as a whole is what is attributed the power to. And so as an organized voice, or as a group of people basically trying to live their best lives, trying to be positive, trying to focus on forward momentum, trying to impart minor wisdom that the guests or I or anyone who attends has picked up along their lives. I think that's the real power of the collective. So I kind of started the conversation, today's conversation, wanting to talk about the power of the individual, which I feel is the platform, is the baseline, is the thing that a person should understand first and foremost, is the individual power that we all have. But then how to play best with a collective, with a team, with a large group, with an institution, how to work within it to use your power to form good. Now, if you're in an institution, or there's an institution out there that you think is evil or doing wrong, or you want to adjust, well, there's a way to do it. But first of all, you've got to understand your own power and how you wield it for good or bad. And I mean, if you're picking up a lightsaber and your black cloak and putting on a black helmet, well, you're on the wrong team. You're using your power incorrectly. And I think that every day we get a choice as to whether we're going to use good or bad in the world. And I'm focusing on good, and the team is focusing on good. And so any power that the collective has in the future will be based on the right reasons, the right people banding together for a good cause, as it were.
I don't know chances let you know, but I do have to end. Just add more excitement for the show today. I can't believe. I think that was a great way to end it. You did chance-like ending there.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate you joining me, and we will wrap it up for whatever reason. If you've got a bus, that's cool. Let's agree to pick up this topic in the future, the near future, with the panel that we had in mind, the effects of power at a more larger scale, for lack of a better term. And appreciate you joining me, buddy.
That was a great conversation, like always.
Yeah, thanks.
Have a good one, Sean. Have a good one, everybody. Sorry about that.
Chimo,
Multiple personalities.